Mr. Alan Pegler brought the Flying Scotsman with a train of 3 British passenger cars to the United States in 1968, traveling from coast to coast as an exhibition to promote global British exports. Built in 1923 for the London and North Eastern Railway, the Flying Scotsman was designed by Sir Nigel Gresley and was one of the most powerful locomotives used by the railway. London and North Eastern Railway used the locomotive for their long-distance express service, notably on the London to Edinburgh Flying Scotsman train service, after which she was named. She still holds 2 world records. One is the first steam locomotive to officially reach 100 miles per hour on the 30th of November 1934 in the United Kingdom. The second record was the longest non-stop run, traveling 441 miles on the 8th of August 1989 in Australia. But that's an interesting story for another time. She was retired from regular service in 1963 after covering 2.08 million miles and enjoyed considerable fame and preservation under the ownership of Mr. Alan Pegler at the time. Following an overhaul in the winter of 1968 to 69, the government agreed to support Pegler running the locomotive in the United States and Canada to promote British exports. To comply with international railway regulations for 3 countries, she was fitted with a cow catcher, a bell, Buckeye couplings, an American-style whistle, air brakes, and high-intensity headlamp. The tour began on the 8th of October, 1969, with a run from Boston, Massachusetts to Atlanta, Georgia, with stops in New York City and Washington, D.C. She continued to Slayton, Texas during the winter that year. Despite a strong start, the tour ran into some major problems. Some states began increasing costs for the tour as they perceived the steam locomotive as a fire hazard. The Flying Scotsman completed its journey from Texas to Wisconsin before finishing in Montreal, Canada in 1970. After a brief stay, she toured from Toronto to San Francisco in 1971, amassing a total of 24,800 kilometers or 15,400 miles. Interestingly, none of these trips carried paying passengers, as it was declared illegal to do so. While in San Francisco, Flying Scotsman ran a series of passenger trips on the San Francisco Belt Railroad and was put on show at Fisherman's Wharf. Although it was a commercial success to begin with, Mr. Pegler was 132,000 pounds in debt by the end of 1971. The government's funding of the tour had been cut off as perceptions changed, and the ruling party no longer felt a steam locomotive was a good example of modern British technology. The Flying Scotsman was placed in storage at the United States Army's Sharp Depot in Lathrop, California, ultimately to keep it out of the hands of unpaid creditors. After working his way back to England aboard a cruise ship, Mr. Pegler was declared bankrupt in the High Court in 1972. Fear and speculation captivated the public that the Flying Scotsman might remain in the United States, or worse, be broken up for scrap or sold. In January 1973, William McAlpine stepped in, dealt with the attorney, paid the creditors, and bought the locomotive. It was welded to the deck of a cargo ship and finally returned to the United Kingdom through way of the Panama Canal in February 1973. Aside from world records, the Flying Scotsman was featured in the Railway series books by the Reverend Wilbert Vere Audrey. The engine had visited the fictional island of Sodor in the book Enterprising Engines, and it was to visit his only remaining brother, Gordon. She has also been featured in numerous movies and video games, and is a legend that you can still visit. The Flying Scotsman will be running non-stop return services for the 11-mile Heritage Railway track between Sheffield Park and East Grinstead for 5 days from 25 to 29 August in 2022, among other trips. Seats for this journey must be pre-booked in advance. Visitors can also see the locomotive on static display at the Sheffield Park from the 17th to 24th of August and from the 30th of August through the 5th of September. Tickets are available to book, and rumor has it you won't have to work your way back on a cruise ship. They really will take you round trip. Visit FlyingScotsman.com for tickets and more information. These are interesting things with JC.